Welcome back to Weems Motor Co. Let's get Jack's bottom end together. Stick around. Okay, so the last time we were on Jack's bike, we were breaking down this engine, getting it all the way down to the sludge trap, and now we got the cases all cleaned up and all the parts ready to go back together. I've done this many times, many different bikes. I always tell people the best process in doing this is that you assemble the crankshaft, get it inside of the cases, and then put that inside of the frame because it's a lot lighter, keeps from scratching, nicking, breaking things, but it also allows you to build everything on the engine while it's inside the motorcycle. So that's the process today. I'm gonna get Jack's crankshaft together. I'm gonna get it inside of these cases with new bushings, new bearings, all of that stuff inside there, so that when he fires this thing up and goes to make that ride to Birmingham, Alabama, he has absolutely no worries in the world. It will be right. So first thing we need to do is we need to check out that new sludge trap. So let's head over to the crank. All right, so here we are over at the crankshaft. We have this thing meticulously cleaned. We went into that sludge trap hole, cleaned it out with a wire brush wheel, went in and out, flushed this thing so it's amazing. Went ahead and polished all the bearing surfaces and journals, made sure that it's ready to go and you could eat off of this thing. So in comparison, I just wanted to show you really quickly. So this is our old sludge trap. So if you can see, she is plugged all the way up at the end. So we could have cleaned this out and reused it, but rather than doing that, it's just a lot easier buying a brand new one. It only costs about $5, but got a new one of these, so we're going to insert this into the sludge trap here, and basically I just take a marker and put a line right on that indexing hole, because that hole indexes on the top of the crankshaft and you have a bolt that goes down, has to be torqued, keeps this sludge trap from twisting or turning or moving in and out, keeps it held into place. So you'll make sure as we're sliding that in, we'll take a flashlight, look down, that we'll make sure that we align that hole up to where that bolt is, and then we can go ahead and torque that down. Then we'll get onto the sludge trap plug. We're going to reuse the original one. Typically, sometimes I'll get a new version that has like an Allen head, but I just thought it was cool that this one had never been into before, so, and it's actually in really great shape, so we're going to reuse that one. And we'll talk about, when we get to that point, an oil way that you got to watch out for. But let's get this sludge trap into the crank. Alright, now before we put that plug right there in the end of that sludge trap, we want to talk about this special little oil galley that goes through here. So right here at the end of our crankshaft is a hollow tube. It's not really a tube, it's just been machined out of the center of the crank. It's hollow and it goes up and it comes out just at the beginning of this hole prior to where that sludge trap is. So when we put this plug in, we have to be careful that we don't seat it so far in that we are blocking that oil line. There's a couple techniques to do it. You can take an air hose and put it at the end and blow and make sure that you're feeling air come out of the journals of the crank. You know, there's a bunch of different ways I've seen guys do it, but you know, spraying brake fluid, I don't like to put any more contaminants in the system than I have to, so I just typically just take my little air hose and put a little pressure right there at the end, make sure that we are not blocking that oil way. So let's get that plug in and we can move on to getting the connecting rods going. Let's make it happen. Going back, just wanted to point out that one bolt at the very top that is torqued to 33 foot-pounds. There's no torque spec on the plug for the sludge trap. Just want to make sure that you don't have that oil way blocked, which we blew our air line through there, and ensure that that's fine. Next step in the process is assembling the rod bearings onto the rods, getting them onto the crankshaft, and torquing those down to 28 foot-pounds. Something to note, I've said this many times. If you're watching this video as a how-to, you probably want to go back and refer to your manual. I do videos that say, hey, watch how I do this, because there's 99 ways to skin a cat. This is just one way of doing it. Many guys have different procedures and processes for doing these, so make sure you go check out some of those other videos if you're looking for a how-to. So now, with that being said, watch how I do this. Now that we got that crankshaft together and it is the next day, I just wanted to take a moment before we put the crankshaft into the cases to talk about differences of bearings and bushings inside these unit construction triumphs. Now you have these larger sets of bearings that go on the ends of the crankshaft. You got your standard roller bearing, and then you have an uncaged style bearing with a race that goes in on one side. Back on the gearbox, we're going to have two roller bearings, two different diameters, and then you also have what's called needle bearings. One you can see all the way through, the other one has a back in it, so you need these sets. And then for the camshafts, we actually run on bushings, so you have a couple bushings that go on the timing side with a little lip on the outer portion, and then on the inner portion you have two bushings. One's a little bit longer than the other. The longer one has a hole in it. Now we have all brand new bearings, as these are the old ones that came out. The new bearings are over in the freezer getting nice and cold, so we can go ahead and heat these cases up, expanding that aluminum, making these bushings and bearings a lot easier to go into the cases. So we'll take our time, make sure we do all of that. But the first thing we're going to do is these bushings, because these bushings, once they are installed, they need to be reamed to proper size so that they're line bored adjacent to each other from side to side, and we can make sure that those camshafts right in there nice and smooth as they are supposed to. Special tools required for this process. You can buy those kits from maybe several different British tooling manufacturers. I personally use classic British Cycles. They hook you up with a good little kit. So we're going to do that first. We don't want to put those other bearings in there because we are going to be reaming and metal shavings might get into the bearings. So do these cam bushings first, and then we can move on to heating up those cases and doing all the other ones. So let's get these things going. One last thing to note, on our intake cam side, behind that bushing is a timing breather disc. Now this little disc sits at the back behind the bushing, and as the cam rotates, there's another disc that line up with these little triangular cutouts and relieve the crankcase pressure through a ventilation system that comes out through the backside, in through the primary, and then out the bottom of the engine. So we want to make sure that you have that nice little disc placed in the back before you even push that bushing in, or otherwise you're just going to be in a bad place. So that's it. Let's get the bushings out of the freezer, get these cases heated up, and get them pressed into place. Quick things to note, you probably noticed me taking a marker and marking certain spots on the bushings and certain spots on the casings. Well, there are oil galleys that go through, and we want to make sure that we line those up so that those bushings are getting the proper oiling system. Now, there is a special tool that you need for this project, and this one is made by Lowbrow Customs. This is a cam bushing driving tool. You want to make sure you have the proper stuff when you're putting these things together, because you could mess up some things if you're not doing it right. Obviously, a lot of heat. Those bearings being in the freezer, they go right where they need to be. Super excited about that. We're going to let these cases cool down for a few minutes, and then we're going to show you how to ream them out, and then we can start getting these things together. So let's let them cool down for a second. All right, now now that we got all of those bushings installed and it has cooled down, the next portion to do is to make sure that those are reamed and fitted correctly for the cams that are going in there. Obviously, we're going to need all of our hardware because we're going to have to bolt these two cases together to be able to line ream and line bore those out so that they're parallel when the cams go in. We don't have any funkiness there. We got a kit from Classic British Spares. They will offer this great kit for reaming out your cam bushings. Come with everything you need and precision, wonderful, good equipment. But on the timing side of our engine, we have a precision ground ball bearing. And what this does is it's not really considered reaming, it's more considered what's called broaching. So we actually take this ball bearing and we drift it through very lightly using lubrication. And as it goes through, it actually opens up that bushing to fit the camshaft correctly. So I'm going to take this ball bearing, take some oil, and then just simply drift it through on the timing side of the cases. So as you can tell, it doesn't take a whole lot of pressure or anything like that. Just nice, light little taps to get that driven through. I do like to use a 6" 3/8 extension because it is cupped at the end and I can get that lined up just right. Now that we have that done, we can go ahead and bolt the two cases together and install that ream so that we have these boards straight. So process in that, make sure you have all of your hardware laid out nice and neat. The other side of the cases do have a blind hole. Let me grab them real quick. So this side, you can tell that is a blind hole back there, so we couldn't drift a ball bearing through there. So we're actually going to have to use a reamer, and we just so happen to have that reamer right here. This is the ream on this little sleeve. So this portion is the diameter that we just drifted on this side of the cases. So we're going to put this into these cases with that ream going up, and we're able to ream out that hole that is blind down in there. Now, as we're reaming this, very important that we are always rotating this in a clockwise manner. What happens if you go in a counterclockwise manner, all of the buildup of the shavings are on these flutes and it could reverse back and you can actually open it up too large. So we want to make sure that as we're going down, we're going in a clockwise manner, and even when we're coming out, we're continually going in a clockwise manner. Make sure that everything is line bored correctly. So let's get these cases bolted together with the ream in place, and we can start doing this. So as you can tell, there are all sorts of shavings down in the bottom of that. So now the next step in the process is making sure that everything is super clean. We're going to go ahead and clean all the oil galleys, everything on these engine cases, so that we can get ready to put that crankshaft in there. To save you time, we're not going to show you how to clean things. You should know how to go in and clean everything out. So we're going to clean these up, and the next step of the process is getting those cams in there to make sure that the ream was good, and then getting the crankshaft down on top. shop so that we can get all this buttoned up and we can get this engine back into Vivian, the 1966 Triumph chopper that Jack owns. So let's get things cleaned up and get back to work. All right, so we got everything nice and cleaned up. The next step in the process that I like to do is to go ahead and put in that needle bearing into the gearbox housing, the one that has the closed back. This is the old one. We got the new one in the freezer, getting cold, shrinking down, and also the roller bearing that goes into the gearbox right there. I like to go ahead and get those on so it's out of the way and everything. When we are putting these in, obviously we're going to heat up the cases just like we do with all the other bearings. The bearings are in the freezer freezing, so it just fits together nicely. There is an oil seal that goes onto the gearbox, always remembering that your spring faces inward in towards the gearbox. But before you put that seal on, you want to make sure you put on your retaining ring that holds that bearing nice and tight into place. That'll get the bearings in here. Then we also have the bearing on the inside of the cases for the crankshaft. Same process as putting in this bearing. We'll heat it up, drift that into place, and it will be ready to go to get onto getting the crankshaft into these cases. Let's get it heated up. Now that we got all the bushings and bearings in place, we're going to load in the cams. Before we do the cam, we got to do that breather back there behind the intake cam. Put the cams in there, make sure everything's lubed nice and neat. Put the crankshaft down on top of the primary side of the motor, and then we're going to put all of our gasket sealing compound around those surfaces. Then we lay on the timing side, and with all of our hardware laid out, we want to torque everything down so it's nice and tight, sealed up. Then we can have this bottom end buttoned up. One thing to note before we get that all put together, we have that breather tube that we were talking about, that crankcase breather from the intake cam. At this time, it's probably a good point to go ahead and put that tube on there so we can get to it, because once those cases are together, it's kind of way up in there. So throw the tube on first, get the cams, all that stuff, yada, 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 what we just said, get it all loaded in, and we're just going to do it all in this one take. So you guys, let's get to work. Crankshaft cams all in there nice and neat. Now the next step of the process is putting that gasket compound on there. But one thing I like to do, because I stand behind my engine builds and all of the work that I do, is this nice little cavity right here inside of the engine. I put one of my business cards because this motor is 58 years old. Probably never been down to that bottom end, which we've seen in the sludge trap. So I want to be able to give the next person to go inside this engine a little surprise when they open up those cases. They find a Weems Motor Co. business card, talks about our website, talks about our YouTube channel, and who knows, maybe they'll go to our website in 50 years and check out what we got going on. I probably won't be here, but hey, something cool to find inside there. So we're gonna go ahead and get the gasket compound on there, throw that business card right in that little triangle area, and get this thing buttoned together. Let's get back to work. All buttoned up nice and neat. The last thing you want to do before you finalize everything is to make sure that that crankshaft rotates nice and easy and that your cams are rotating. So let's check it out. Like a butter. Oh yeah, everything looks great. Next time we see this engine, it will be going into the frame of this amazing motorcycle we've titled Vivian after Jack's grandma. So With that, we're going to wrap up today's video. Thank you guys for hanging out. If you are new around here, jump down and hit that subscribe button. If you really like the video, hit that thumbs up, turn those notifications on, and let everyone know what's going on right here at Weems Motor Co. Peace.